everyone, and welcome to another exciting Spoilercast. I'm Captain Logan, and today we are talking about the Netflix Daredevil show, the long-anticipated Geekvolution discussion review of this show. It's been out for a couple weeks now. I have seen it 1.5 times. I tried really hard to get through it, two full rounds, and I didn't quite manage it. Anyway, let me go ahead and introduce my co-host, and then we'll get right into it. Hey, Dan, how many times did you watch it?
I got through it about 1.5 times myself as well, which was good because it was good to refresh my memory on the earlier episodes anyway. But I would have watched more if I had time. It's that good that it's worth watching, more than once through, I think.
And it's Steve Baxi.
Yes, I watched it twice, and I've got 10 pages of notes, so this should be fun.
Oh my god, of course you do. All right, and so we're going to get a dissertation from Steve, and then the rest of us are just going to tell you what we thought of it. And then we get to the Real Manos.
And I just finished it 20 minutes ago.
Whoa! Wait. So you watched the last episode during Crisis?
All right, Daredevil, let's talk about it.
He was totally watching Daredevil during Crisis.
Yeah, I actually could have. Now that I think about it. No, I finished watching the last 3 episodes earlier today, and yeah, it was fantastic. I'm not a binge watcher guy. So I just tried to watch the show as quickly as I could. I knew we were doing this on Sunday, so I had to kind of make it snappy instead of watching them once a day or something like that. Yeah, for me, 13 episodes in 1 week is a binge.
Well, let's go ahead and get right into it. And as I always like to do with these, of course, obviously you clicked on a video that said Spoilercast in it, so we're talking about as much as we can, and this is for folks that have already watched this show. Please watch the show before you watch this. But anyway, so as I always do, I'm going to go round robin and get a great thing and a not so great thing if you can come up with such a thing. Try not to say the last great thing that somebody else said. This always helps to really spur the conversation on. And then what we'll do is we will just kind of discuss the series as one big piece as in its entirety, and I'm sure this will go at least an hour because there's just so much here, and I know we won't even get to everything we'd probably like to talk about. I want to begin with Dan Torrey, as opposed to the other Dan that's here. Dan, give me a great thing, and then if you can think of any major criticism, throw that out for me too.
A great thing is, I think, just the general faithfulness of this adaptation. This is simultaneously the most faithful and best quality superhero adaptation I think I've ever seen. I think got the tone exactly right. The casting is fantastic. The writing is really great, and all of the themes and ideas from the best Daredevil stories are present here. I think they got the character spot on. There's, the classic questions of justice, morality. What does that mean when you have the kind of power that a guy like Matt Murdock does in his, everyday life and in the costume? The stuff with the Kingpin is great. The parallels between those two characters. I loved everything about it. I don't really have too many complaints about it, to be honest with you. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Everything about it was great. All right, let's go to the Real Manos.
I would, of course, agree with the Dan Torrey that we're talking with today. I think they got the tone on this exactly right. It fits in well within the Marvel Cinematic Universe without being gratuitous. The darkness was well earned. It has a great steady build. Nothing felt like it was dragging or didn't have to be there. All the performances were just fantastic from even the minor actors. And if I had to pick a bad thing, are we doing that? Back thing too.
If you can think of something, yeah.
I can't think of anything.
It's a challenge Dan failed at. Let's see if you can nail it.
I can't think of anything to criticize as far as a semi-professional critic of anything that's artistically badly done. If I had to point out anything, maybe killing off. Well, this is spoilers. Killing off Ben Urich.
Yeah.
That is akin to killing off Commissioner Gordon in Batman Begins. That kind. I mean, it works extremely well for the story, And if you hadn't been familiar with Daredevil, obviously it works very well. But if they're planning to do more seasons of this show, that character will be missing, and that will be missing. There will be a void for what Ben Urich does for the Daredevil universe. Maybe they might replace him with a different character. But that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, folks, there's no way that guy is going to Tahiti. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's I thought about that too.
Steve Baxi.
Okay, let's see. I agree with everything the Dan Torrey and the Real Manos, as opposed to the fake Manos, has said about this show. As far as the best thing that's different than adaptation, casting, tone, and complexity, because you guys mentioned everything good. I think my favorite thing about the show, and this is the thing I keep
Steve likes the lighting.
The thing I love about this show is its ability to integrate symbols in the most natural ways I've ever seen. The painting, the Rauschenberg style white painting, has been on my mind for weeks now. It's a beautifully done symbol. Everything in the art gallery is fantastic. This is a show that's just as artsy as any art house film I've ever seen, and it completely earns it, and it's completely natural in every way it does it. And that's really hard to pull off in a lot of ways. But they've done it. I thought it was great. As far as a not so great thing, they did a lot of good stuff with Matt's got the devil in him, so to speak, and he's trying to battle with the angels and demons in him and the rules to kill and all that. The fact that he doesn't name himself Daredevil kind of bugs me.
Oh, wow, I didn't even think of that.
I feel like there should have been a bigger cap-off to him personally naming himself Daredevil and acknowledging that he is a devil, because he had that conflict all the way through. The fact that the city just gives him the name is a little bit easy, considering how well they give everything else a reason and a purpose. Like, that's the easiest way to name a superhero. This show doesn't do that, except for that.
Can I throw out a potential rebuttal?
Sure.
I don't know if this is good or not. I feel like maybe he has, in a way, already named himself, and not named himself, but he's obviously taken on the devil role with the horns, because he goes ahead and gives that costume horns, so he's embracing the devil thing that was already in the newspapers, the devil of Hell's Kitchen. He's to a degree embracing that, almost as if to say that he's aware that he's walking this incredibly thin line. And then it's the city that names him Daredevil, almost to put more of a positive spin on it. And maybe this is a stretch, but you could almost say that that's the city embracing him even farther than he's embracing himself. Maybe he needs that kind of recognition from the city to give him almost more of a nickname kind of superhero name. Because
I have thought of that. It's just I would have liked one or maybe two lines just addressing it at some point.
I think they talk a lot about how Matt Murdock is a man that was created by the city throughout the various episodes, so that didn't really bother me too much, because I think they set it up thematically enough where, the environment that these people are in defines what sort of roles they have to have in the city to try to make it a better place. So that didn't really bother me too much.
That's actually a good point, Dan, because that actually kind of fits in a little bit with the kind of Frank Miller-ish story language. Is like, the city is my mother, or my lover, whatever it is this week. And
that's true, because whether you're Daredevil or the Spirit, if you're being written by Frank Miller, you're gonna have that.
You have some issues with women.
Yes, and that too, yeah.
But it might be fun, like, if we actually get to see J. Jonah Jameson in the Spider-Man Marvel movie, like maybe he gave him the name. That would be a fun kind of thing to tag on.
Well, I want to say that not to argue with you, but I want to say that when we see the Daredevil name, it's in a newspaper article from the same place that Urich's working for.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. So I'm just saying that unless Jameson was working there instead of the Bugle, and maybe that's. I guess I'm just saying that I kind of doubt that's what. Speaking of the newspaper, though, how cool was it that some artist rendering is a classic Daredevil panel?
That's Alex. Yeah, I recognized it right off. That's Alex Baby's art, actually.
I just think it's really cool that we get a more realistic looking like body armor suit, which in this particular context, that irritates me sometimes, but in this it makes perfect sense. I mean, like, they make a big deal out of why he gets a new costume. It takes episodes to get it. And it's cool that when somebody sees it and we get an artist rendering, it's like he's so larger than life that he's drawn like a comic book character. I love that.
Yeah, and don't forget, New York has already seen superheroes running around in colorful costumes, so
sure,
this kind of just fits in. You have to remember that. You know, they've already seen Captain America running around beating up aliens. So this kind of falls into place.
That's one of the That's one of the things I wanted to mention, Manos, because I think you made a great point when you said that this is a show that fits in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a really clever and non-obtrusive kind of way. You know, we don't have Iron Man showing up and be like, hey guys, look at me. You know? They make it into they weave it into the fabric of the story. The Avengers contained the destruction of the Battle of New York, like they say they do in the movie, to one block, and that happens to be Hell's Kitchen. And Hell's Kitchen in modern New York is a really nice place. They fix it up a lot since the 60s. It's no longer like really run down and poverty-ridden and stuff. So you have the Avengers destroy this block, and it creates a power vacuum where someone with money is required in order to build the city back up again. And look at it, it's Wilson Fisk. That's a really cool idea. I didn't expect them to connect it in a way like that, and set it so firmly in modern day New York City. I feel like that's really cool. They made an effort to explain why Hell's Kitchen is the way it is in here, even though that's contrary to how New York is. It's the total Marvel thing of setting it in the real world, New York City, and having it feel like that. It's very cool.
It was so smart. I mean, I just lost it in the first episode when that's what they were doing, because I was like, that's really cool, because what they're able to do then is to create a pocket where it's almost like a pocket dimension. It's almost like its own little world, right? And so we can have this super dark, gritty thing, and it can be this stylized, even though the rest of what we've seen so far in Marvel Universe doesn't look like that. And then we can build our own kind of subset shared universe inside of that with all these other Netflix shows. That's brilliant. I was a little unsure what they would do with that. I kind of figured that when we first got the announcement that they would just go, okay guys, you're just going to have a suspension of disbelief, and they didn't do that. It's so believable. That was, I don't know, that was really cool.
One of the things I really loved about that is, summer action movies tend to romanticize battles, especially the ones more fantastic like Avengers and stuff like that, where you really don't get to see the fallout. You don't have time. You got to run to the credits and show the hit music for the soundtrack. Who cares about the innocent bystanders? And this actually picks up on that. I mean, it mentions that I think hundreds of people died in that battle. Even though the Avengers saved the day, hey, you have an invasion in the middle of a major city, people are just going to get killed. That's it. And it really effectively plays with that, and it plays with the aftermath fallout. I just thought whoever put that in motion, that was just a genius move.
I still think that the next series should be Damage Control. Obviously, that's the next place we should go. Well, real quick, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to throw out my good thing and not so good thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or sure. I'm going to throw out my good thing, and then I'm going to noodle for a minute and try to come up with something. Wow, what to say that you guys didn't touch on? Character study. Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock are in so many ways the same person. And it's just brilliant. I could spend an hour on my own sitting in front of a camera just coming up with all of the fascinating ways in which these two men are the same. And of course different. But like, there are so many even just subtle things in their backstories that are the same. Just real quick, a couple of really interesting ones I noticed. And by the way, folks, real quick, folks have asked me if I'm gonna, with this particular thing, eventually go ahead and do a full-blown superhero rewind. Yeah, that's gotta happen. Because there's just too much to analyze. So both of their fathers at one point give them a taste of alcohol. there's so many things like that where there's just like these really little subtle details that they both have in their background that inform who they are. It is such a fascinating nature versus nurture kind of story, asking the question of whether or not these two men are naturally who they are and they're discovering it, because there's these wonderful internal conflicts that they both have that are pretty much the same internal conflict but flipped, where one of them is the evil, the ill intent, as he says at the end. God, I love that. One of them is clearly the villain and one of them is clearly the hero, but they can't decide that yet. And so Wilson Fisk is trying to look at himself as a hero and ultimately decides he's the bad guy. And Daredevil says, just like he does in the movie, but it works this time. It makes sense this time. I'm not the bad guy. Oh boy, all the things this show does that the movie tried to do, and it went, yeah, we know how to do that. We'll just rip it out and do it right.
I was thinking when he said that,
I couldn't believe
now
it.
The show is just showing off.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. You get to the end and he says, I'm not the bad guy. He wasn't sure until right then. And I think even still in that moment, he's saying that not because he believes it, but because he's trying to force himself there. And just this question of, are they discovering who they really are, or are they simply making a choice? It's so fascinating and breaks your brain because it's an impossible question to answer. Bad thing. This is not necessarily a problem, but it's just a question I had. Maybe you guys can help me answer it. How exactly did Wilson Fisk manage to get this powerful on his own?
They say that he acquired the books of the previous mafia person. Wesley says that because he used to be employed by the other guy. So we don't know exactly how he raised up to the mafia and took over for the other guy, but he got his status and money by filling the power vacuum of the mafia dude that he took out, presumably, or whatever.
And importantly, that mafia guy, Rigoletto, is a comic book character, and in the comics, Fisk is his bodyguard until he decides to kill him and take over his empire. So potentially we could get that explained in another season.
Okay, great. I mean, I figured they had that figured out, and I just missed something because it's one of the only things that I was like, I'm not real sure how we got there, but it's a thing that they're just not completely explaining more than it's a thing that just that doesn't actually make sense. Guys, when was the last time you saw something, especially TV show-wise, when was the last time you saw something this tightly plotted where every scene matters? And can you believe that we're getting it with a superhero show? I don't know. I'm having a really hard time not looking at this as the best superhero adaptation ever.
I agree.
And I
don't think that's
that would be.
And I can't believe I'm saying that. Now, they get to cheat a little bit because they get 13 whole episodes and they make a movie out of it. Like they use all their real estate completely to their advantage. I don't use this word lightly. Masterpiece.
Yeah.
I agree. This is just a masterclass in writing these kind of characters. Arrow and Flash need to take writing lessons on the way that Karen Page is written in this show.
Oh my God!
Yes,
she's one of the most compelling female characters I've ever seen on a television show before. She's got an addictive personality, so we're setting up some of the born again stuff with her that we're probably going to do later. She's clearly hiding things. I noticed when I watched her the second time. She scrawls something on a piece of paper, and Foggy walks in the room. She quickly puts it in her purse, and it's never brought up again.
Wow.
There's subtle little things like that they're setting up with her character. She's a go-getter. She wants to uncover the truth and make the city less corrupt, like Matt. And I love their relationship because you feel like she's maybe falling for Foggy a little bit, but then you realize that she's solely into Matt the whole time, and it's because he's the one that believed in her in the first place. Foggy was ready to get up out of the room when she had no money when they first met her. And Matt was the guy that was like, no, we gotta help her. And believed her, and that's the reason why she's so infatuated with him, and it makes sense. But he doesn't really pay all that much attention to her because he's Matt Murdock and he's a pimp.
And it's not a competition. It's subtle. Like, it's a girl that likes two guys. We like both of these people. We aren't paying attention to the fact that it's a love triangle. It's that these are interesting, fascinating people that could very naturally develop relationships with each other. And when Foggy has that date with Karen before everything blows up, you definitely buy that. And then at the end, when Matt needs Karen to console him, you buy that too, because these people have been through so much together. And it's more of a friendship before it's a giant relationship debacle like Arrow and Flash.
It helps, of course,
And-
that it helps, of course, that Matt doesn't get to spend very much time at the law firm, and a lot of the time he's like trapped in buildings and doing all these things, and also that he tries to date another girl, but of course that doesn't work. And their relationship's interesting, and we should talk about that too. But go ahead, Dan.
It is.
Well, I mean, this is what mature writing is. It's not always like, oh, I'm such a dark individual. No, that's not mature writing.
Yeah.
What we see...
Mature with a lowercase, Sam.
Just using the three characters of Matt, Foggy, and Karen, how their interactions, the way they deal with each other, from scene to scene and episode to episode. This is extremely well-crafted, like mature adult writing.
I agree, and I think it's an inspired choice to make Karen Page Ben Urich's sidekick. I've never seen that before. That's really cool. I think she potentially could replace Ben Urich in that role that you were speaking about, the Commissioner Gordon information helper kind of guy. He's not a police officer, obviously. He's a reporter, but he has underground connections and stuff. And Karen, we know, has some sort of seedy background, so you can see her getting entangled in that kind of stuff.
You guys, Dan and Steve, and probably even Manos, you guys know Daredevil a little bit better than I do. Is that dark background thing a comic book thing? Or
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So don't tell me anything, because I need to go back and reread my Miller, because it's just been a long time and I've never finished it. But
she's not
Born
in his
Again.
main run. She's in Born Again. In the Daredevil comics, she leaves for a very long time, and Miller brought her back and introduced all of the dark background stuff with her.
Okay.
And Born Again is just the best Daredevil story ever. And the fact that they seeded all that stuff in here, I was really happy about. Like when she has to shoot the guy and she starts drinking the alcohol, and Foggy says that she smells like a distillery. I was like, oh, she's got her addictive personality. This is classic Karen Page.
Dan, I've got a quick question for you. Would you agree if I were to say, and who knows if this breaks down later on, because obviously, as you've said many times, it's a Daredevil girlfriend, so she probably gets killed at some point. But do you think that at least in what we have so far, that these three people are a TOS level triad?
Yeah, I think so. They're very much a team in trying to clean up the city and stuff, and I like all three of these people. I love the chemistry they have together, and importantly, when you guys were talking about the love triangle thing earlier, this is a thing that the Daredevil comics did. Foggy and Matt used to fight over Karen all the time in like the early Stan Lee, Bill Everett stuff. And I was very glad that we got a little bit away from that. I mean, they both like her, so they're kind of doing that story, but it's not as cheesy, I guess, as it was in those early comics, because it gets kind of cheesy at points.
And also, I one of the things I liked about the way Karen was handled is she was truly equal as far as pushing the story forward. She wasn't dragged along just to be there. She actually got a lot of meals in motion throughout this entire series. So yeah, I mean, even in some places more than Foggy did.
Well, I would argue that worldview-wise, she is somewhere between Matt and the Kingpin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting, because you've got a guy that refuses to kill, you've got a guy who started from killing, and then you've got somebody who didn't know how she would handle that sort of thing until she got a gun in her hand. And I just think that's super interesting, because she's in it. These two people by the end have decided exactly who they are. She's like this right now, yeah?
Yeah,
and how about... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, it's interesting, going back to the point you were making earlier about nature versus nurture. One could argue that Karen Page, that's not who she is necessarily. It's if you put anyone in a situation where they're about to die and the choice is I be killed or kill this guy, they're going to kill that guy, because that's who human beings are.
And then what does it do to you afterwards? It's almost like whatever your nature is, now you're at this like totally chasm, like, you know, what do I do now? Who am I now? And this is in a far more sophisticated way than most of the superhero things we see deal with. Is doesn't it deal with a lot of the cliches we're used to seeing? Doesn't it deal with all those big questions of, if you kill someone, does it completely change your whole universe, and you're never yourself again after that? You become broken in some way. We've seen that kind of thing done ad nauseum and in really obvious and not not very believable kinds of ways.
I think the word you're looking for, Logan, is stupid.
Arrow? But you look at things like thank you. You look at things like Arrow. You look at even I don't think Birds of Prey really handled it right entirely. And then I've not ever done a review of that, but that was just the first thing that sprang to mind. And then you get to this, and it's like all that stuff is fresh again, and I'm not even thinking about how it's dealing with all of the obvious and standard tropes of superhero stuff. And then you kind of don't want to ever see anything do it again, because I don't know how you do it as well.
Well, but this is when you hit these tropes, the stereotypes and tropes, even when you hit them correctly and don't go on autopilot, like you and I see like over and over again, and we will continue to see. It really does set the material, even if it's a type of scene you've seen before. It still matters. Man, that scene between Karen and Wesley, that is still like, if I had a top 10 list, that would be in there. That scene was just stunning, actually. Yeah. Between the two of them, and how it did not play out the way I expected. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, well, real quick, let me make this point now you said that, Manos, because I think this is an important thing to throw out really quick. This is a show that surprisingly allows itself to be completely character-driven and let characters do whatever they would do in the moment. Yeah. It's not about, we mapped out, I mean, who knows how they wrote this, but it's not about, it doesn't look like anyway that it's about, we mapped it out so this character's going to die at the end, this character's not going to be allowed to die until we get to such and such an episode. It's not about that stuff. It's what would she do in the moment? What would Kingpin do in the moment when he kills Ben Urich? That stuff does two things. It gives it so much story credibility because these characters simply do what they would do. And secondly, it tells us how high the stakes are. We don't, just because we're familiar with these characters at all, doesn't mean that we know what's going to happen. We have no idea. All bets are off. Could Foggy Nelson die in second season? Yeah, he could at this point. Yeah. Sure he could. You know what I mean? I never thought I'd see Ben Urich die, and also it does a thing that we rarely in things like this, like adaptations of major comic book things and stuff like that we never really allow to happen, which is, we'll say there are casualties on both sides. This show, there are casualties on both sides, and I feel them myself. And I kind of feel bad for losing Wesley, even because because Kingpin is made such a real character, and I buy that they're actually friends, and there's a parallels between Wesley and Foggy. Holy crap! Really? Right? So I don't know. That's the one of the most wonderful things about it, is that you don't know anything can happen. Sorry. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, you mentioned that everyone does what they want to do in the moment, but also the show is so deliberate that it takes all of these superhero tropes, and it takes all these sort of predictable situations, and it makes them fresh not only because the characters are discovering them naturally, but because everything we see is useful information. There's not a single shot in this show that's wasted material. All of it's building, all of it's well-directed, all of it's paced so deliberately that every shot matters, and you go back and you rediscover tiny moments between Matt and his dad, or Kingpin and his dad, or Karen and Foggy, and they mean something in the end, and they inform those decisions, and it feels not only mapped out, but also very natural, because that's kind of how life is, that there are very defining moments that you see, and this show trims it down to nothing but those defining moments.
And that's... Yeah, it's so good. Like, the luxury of this format is they have everything mapped out, and it's written like a novel in that everything is foreshadowed ahead of time, and if you watch it a second time, you'll catch it. Like, I noticed in the scene where they meet Karen Page, the show basically starts with Karen Page saying, "What are you guys, a couple of good Samaritans?" And then it's bookended with the Kingpin reading that.
I didn't pick up on that.
At the end of the show.
That's amazing.
And Ben Urich, the whole time, he's talking about, "I've got one last story in me," and I didn't see his death coming. But you watch it a second time, and you're like, "Yeah, this character has nothing left to do after he tells this story. He has to die for the narrative to be competent and work." Yeah. It's so good.
And then when you introduce Ben Urich, he talks to that mobster saying, where the guy is grateful that he didn't bring his kids into a story. And he dies because Kingpin has his mother brought into a story.
Oh, yeah, good call. Jeez. See, I didn't get to finish it a second time, so some of that stuff... I didn't think anything of, say, like, the cufflinks the first time around. And then you find out what they mean, and like when he says, when Vanessa at their first dinner, or their second dinner, I guess, asks about the cufflinks, and she says, "Did you lose your father?" And he says, "When I was a boy." Wow, what an understatement! Yeah. when you finally find out what actually happened. Wow. And anyway, no, I couldn't believe all, and like even really super little stuff, because the way this story is plotted is it's not plotted, right? Its characters do things, and then the story happens because of actions and consequences. So, which is, you know, what a story is, yeah? So, it's sad that I have to bring things to those kind of brass tacks, but we don't see that as much as I wish we did. It's sad. I love that this is kind of, I think, and I keep saying this is going to change everything. This is going to be the standard, but it's too bad it took us this long to get there. I'm talking about for superhero fiction. It's House of Cards sophisticated. First season House of Cards sophisticated. One thing I noticed the other day when I was watching through a second time was you get things that are this subtle. Like, they remember every minute detail. It's almost like every character has a different writer that's making sure that that character remembers everything they've said and who they are and what they're about. Foggy mentions that the big thing he misses about, and by the way, he's hilarious, the levity in the show. Foggy mentions that the thing he misses about interning at the big law firm is the elevators. And when he goes back there and talks to the girl that he used to be with, that he sleeps with again later, the big thing that he's crushed about before they leave is that he doesn't get to ride on the elevator. I loved that.
The show you mentioned, it's so good. Like, I was laughing in places where I was sort of uncomfortable. Like at Ben Urich's funeral, the priest walks up to Matt and he goes, "How you holding up?" And he goes, "Like a good Catholic boy." And the priest says, "That bad, huh?" And I was dying. It was hilarious.
Well, there's a lot of
funeral scene.
There are a lot of really funny things done with the whole Catholic thing, and I was a little surprised by that, because it's almost like Matt's not super comfortable with it, but it's part of who he is, right? So he just keeps going. I think it's so interesting, by the way, that Matt, and I think this is kind of common, that Matt is always at church, but he's never in church. And he never actually goes to mass.
It's like roots. Yeah, that's kind of mad.
He's part. It's part of him. That line where when he's first met Claire. I keep thinking of House of Cards. There's a Claire here. When he first meets Claire, and she says, "You're really good at taking a beating," and he says, "That's mostly the Catholicism."
I really enjoy, because it can be a little cliched, specifically in Daredevil stuff, but in fiction in general, like there's so much super seriousness to Catholicism and Catholic characters, and I know plenty of Catholic people who have a sense of humor about their religion, about themselves, and I was very happy to see that present in the characters in the dialogue in this show.
And more present than I think we've seen in the comics, because a lot of times we see Daredevil in the comics, he's the Catholic, it's part of the contradiction, we do things with how it affects his life, but we never really do a lot with how he views the religion, or what his place in it is, or how it affects him personally, or whether he believes in it. This show does that in spades. That episode, Speak of the Devil, and Path of the Righteous, those are both great episodes for what Matt thinks of the devil, and what his place is, and what the telos of humanity is, and things like that.
That's a good point. I think Ann Nucini used to play around with its Catholicism pretty well, but sometimes some writers can be guilty of just using his religion as an excuse to brood.
And also just making it a thing that's ironic, right? It's the devil. Okay, so
I loved the priest character in this show too.
Yes.
I think he had a lot of really interesting things to say, especially when he tells the story about when he was in Rwanda and before he was there, he didn't really believe in the devil. He thought it was just a scapegoat that people used to justify their atrocities throughout history. And that speaks so much to what Matt's going through at the time, where he's thinking about whether or not he should kill people, and he thinks, oh, this person deserves to die because it's for the greater good, just like all of the instances in history that guy, the priest was talking about, like the Inquisition and all of that kind of stuff. They, like Steve said, they don't waste any time, and it's always on point, like what the characters are going through at the time. I just loved that scene, and the priest has a lot of good dialogue throughout this, and it kind of speaks to, realistically, I think, how, because I was raised Catholic, so I know how all of that stuff goes. Like, the way that a priest actually approaches you and tries to help you with your problems, at least a good one. And that guy was a good priest. And he was like a weathered, worldly kind of priest. He wasn't like a guy that grew up in, like, the ministry and hasn't seen the world. He was kind of a depressed, dark priest.
He reminds me a little of...
Who's had his faith challenged, not just in his own religion, but in life in general, and seems to be still going on.
Well, he reminds me a little of Ben Urich in that way.
Yeah.
That's true.
And I mean, just to mention the Rwanda thing before we get too far away from it, it's really interesting that Daredevil's always been a lawyer. It's always about justice. This show has so many ideas and conversations about justice. And you get to the Rwanda thing, you get to Kingpin, and it's a very classic notion that people deal with throughout history, that justice is nothing but the interest of the stronger. And so we talk about how that people justify their atrocities just because it's the right thing to do in the moment, but that's only because they have the most power. Those guys in Rwanda, the militants that would kill people that the priest labels as the devil, are just the strongest parties there. And so the idea of that internal strength coming through from an ideal of justice as opposed to just going with the flow of what the world is, and the kind of opportunistic way of getting to power the way the Kingpin does it, or the way other people would do it, and Matt has to try and find not just what works for the city, but also what is he supposed to stand for? What kind of justice is it really?
Yeah, that speaks to what they discuss about the legal profession all throughout the show, because Matt's all about using the law to try to help the little guy, the one that the laws are being used to sort of keep people down, at least in Hell's Kitchen there. Like, we see the old woman struggling with the property rights issues with her apartment, and how the guy that probably works for the hand is trying to buy out so we can take over the block. And
he definitely works for the hand. Let's not pretend like there's any question
like that.
about who that guy works for and what the war is Stick is talking about.
Yeah, so
he practically had a name tag. Said hand.
It said talk to the hand. That's
I just think that's thematically what you're speaking to, Steve, and you know, Matt Marek has a very specific view as to what justice is, and that's Foggy's not a guy that thinks that as deeply about it. Like, no. He wants to do the right thing, but he's not a guy that, you know, stays up at night and thinks about this kind of stuff. Because, like, if Matt Marek didn't put a costume on and go out at night, he'd probably just lay awake and think about this stuff anyway.
Well, Foggy's more of a normal human being than
that's talking about people just being like actually regular people. I think it's really interesting when you have, you know, these people aren't like just archetypes. It's not this person represents this thing and this person represents this thing. It's here's where they seem to be going and where their heads are usually at, but then challenge them, put them in a room and force them to make a decision and see what they do. There was a really cool parallel in one of the early episodes with Foggy and the guy who runs Ben Urich's newspaper, where both of them are talking about wanting to make money. That it's all about make money. In the same episode, this is the thing I noticed the second time around. In the same episode, Foggy gets that check from Wesley and says it has that great line, that great exchange between he and Matt when he says, "If you could see the number on this check, you wouldn't care where it was coming from." And Matt says, "If you couldn't, you would." Oh boy, I love that. And then in almost, I think, or maybe even the very next scene, or maybe it's earlier, I forget, but in the same episode, definitely, Urich's boss tells him, you can't run off and try to get this story. It's not sexy.
And
it's
then
all about
culminates at the end.
It's all about making money.
Compares speaking to the newspaper to prostitution, and that's his kind of his last straw.
Yeah, exactly. And then it turns out that guy may or may not have actually been taking money from the Kingpin. By the way, that was a question I wanted to ask you guys because I didn't get to watch it through entirely a second time. I was a little bit uncertain as to, because there was a question about that, as to whether or not that guy actually was taking money from the Kingpin, or if it was just that other woman that was working there, and if that's what it actually was.
It was the other reporter.
Is that what it was? Okay, I didn't know if it was both of them. Okay, well that's really cool then, because that makes Foggy and that guy may be closer to the same character than I thought they were.
Because there are a lot, if you go back and look, I actually picked up on this just watching only once.
Oh, well, aren't you special?
There's some, it's me. There are some reaction shots of that actress in some of those scenes, particularly the scenes where he's challenging him about taking money from Fisk, and there's some reaction shots of her. And it isn't until she's arrested, it's like, oh, that's what she was thinking. She wasn't thinking, oh, is the boss taking bribes from Fisk? No, she was doing that.
Oh, that's cool.
It's very subtle. It wasn't until she was arrested until it dawned on me.
Man, if only I was Manos, I would have picked up on that.
Well, we all can't be Manos.
Oh, okay.
And again, just speaking to the deliverance of it, not a single extra shot wasted for that. That all built in and amounted to something.
It all matters. And, this is supposed to be writing 101 stuff. That's the thing, is that when you're in writing school, good professors will, good writing mentors will bash you over the head with only include things that reveal something. And this show does that entirely. I mean, there's never a place where I'm like, what is that there for? I mean, there is the first time around, and then I'm like, I watch it again, and I'm like, oh, that's why that's there. Okay. This is one of those things, kind of like Fight Club, where like it's so much better on a second viewing.
Yeah, it's interesting just watching some of the characters in the show that you didn't think that you would like and be larger characters in the show.
Care about, yeah. It has that in common with House of Cards.
Yes, it does. I didn't, like you said, I didn't expect to have any sort of interest in Wesley as a character, but I think I did the moment he goes into the bowling alley after that guy that puts a spike through his face, murders the mafia guy with the bowling ball. And Wesley goes and takes the gun out of the pinball machine because he stashed it under there when the cops came, and he has a gun in his hand, and kids walk by and he goes, "Hi!" I was like, this guy's interesting.
Yeah.
He's fascinating. And he can be really scary, too. Of course, the scene with Karen, but there are several scenes throughout the series where he's just, I've never been this scared of Wesley before. I also, by the way, the pinball scene, it cracks me up that, there was some guys playing, and he just okay, I'll wait. I'll
put a quarter down to get my gun.
Or kill them or beat them up or anything. You're just oh, okay, it's probably smart if I just wait like a normal person and not a psycho.
And he doesn't. He wouldn't like that in the first place. He mentions in that Karen scene that he hates the city. He hates the kind of disgust of it, the fact that there's a layer of filth that you just can't wash away, and so interacting with those kinds of people or talking to those people or fighting with them is just not worth it for him. He leaves a quarter there in a classy way because that's the only thing he likes in the place. He doesn't want to dirty his hands in any way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think he's also just really smart about stuff, right?
Yeah, he's not a dumb guy.
One of the things that I'm fascinated by is that the Kingpin of all people has, in being the other side of the coin of Matt, but not until the end, really, or maybe I don't know. That's the thing. That is the big question. Is that he has some of the superhero stuff figured out that Matt doesn't. He also screws up in ways as if he were a superhero that Matt doesn't. With superhero stuff, we're always playing out the and asking the question, playing out the situation of whether or not you can have personal attachments and be a superhero. This is a guy that wants to clean up the city, and he really believes in that, or at least he's trying to believe in that. And it's not a girlfriend of Matt's that it is with Claire, but then they get over that pretty quickly. So I guess this is actually a parallel with a thing that already happened to Matt, but it's the Kingpin's girlfriend that goes through that whole thing.
Vanessa.
And that is really interesting. But then a thing that he's actually got figured out that Matt doesn't is he's got the confidant, he's got the sidekick or the Alfred that he's able to tell everything to, that believes in everything he's doing, and Matt and Foggy spent 4 episodes on the out.
Yeah, I think Vanessa's a really interesting character as well, because you wouldn't expect a museum curator to be okay with the kind of things that Wilson Fisk does.
No, you wouldn't, and she's still a little bit of a wild card for me. I don't know why exactly she's gotten on board with it. I like that she resisted at first, but then she gets on board pretty quick.
And I think that says what kind of person she is underneath that. The fact that she fell in love with this man.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I think she's a really interesting character because she loves him so unconditionally, and you kind of root for the Kingpin in the scenes where they're together, because the way Vincent D'Onofrio plays Kingpin, and by the way, this guy, he is one of the best actors I've ever seen. The Kingpin, the performance in here, it's different than the way that I've seen the Kingpin portrayed in all other adaptations before, where he's got this, like, uneasiness to him when he has social interaction with people. He's not very confident talking to people. And, like, when Vanessa, like, kind of swats him away the first time he's talking to her, he immediately gives up and starts to walk away, and she's, like, surprised, because most men approach a beautiful woman like that and are relentlessly pursuing them. And she likes him because he's different. And she talks all about that, and I found that to be really interesting. He's a man that treats her like no one else had before, and that's how they connected. And then you see their relationship develop, and you really buy by the end of the show that Kingpin would fight the FBI to try to get back to her, you know?
Well, and Dan, something I found absolutely fascinating, and this is one of the reasons that I buy so much that Daredevil is a character who could go either way, depending on, potentially, depending on a choice that he makes in the moment. And I think that's ultimately what the show is mostly about, is what people become in a moment. There is a thing that Wilson Fisk does all the time that Matt Murdock, to my recollection, never does, and that is apologize constantly. I think that is fascinating. Wilson Fisk is constantly saying, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? This is a guy that takes off a dude's head with a car door! And he's
messing up his date.
And I don't think that he's insincere when he apologizes for things. I think he legitimately thinks he cares about people. And I think by the end, it's up to us to decide if he ever really did. If his father didn't just screw him up that much. Go ahead, Dan.
No,
I'm sorry.
I think your point is very apt, because Frank Miller said something very defining of the Daredevil character in an interview he gave for the Daredevil movie. He said, Matt should have been a villain. His romantic life is the worst. His childhood was terrible. But the thing about Matt Murdock that makes him a hero is that he never gives up. He's just like his dad. And the thing you were saying about somebody, how they behave in a moment, is what the show is about. Matt Murdock spells that out when he's a kid in one of the flashbacks. Or no, it's at the very beginning when he's in the confessional with the priest. He says, in a moment, when my dad was about to be knocked out, he would just get this look in his eyes, and he would just wail on the guy like he had the devil in him. And that's the moment where Jack Murdock became what he was. And Jack Murdock had to pretend to be a person he wasn't to keep his son with a roof over his head. It's really interesting how similar he is to his dad, and that just speaks to you and Frank Miller's points, I think.
Thank you. Well, and then comparing that to Kingpin, who is also exactly his father, but trying not to be his father. And what's really interesting is that Matt wants to be his dad, in a way.
He does, yeah.
But then I don't think, and this is up to interpretation, I'm not sure that either of their fathers, were they to come back from the dead and see where their sons are, would be glad of where they are.
Yeah, I don't think Kingpin's dad would care.
I think his dad would probably be impressed that...
Well, maybe impressed, but I'd like to think that
true.
he would be a little mortified. I don't know if that's true, but I do think that Matt Murdock's father would come back and say, I never wanted you to fight, right? Like,
well, that's the one thing he did not want him to do.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. Which has always been, the sad part about Murdock's. Like, that's the one thing his dad kept asking not to do.
I think it's interesting. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just finishing up.
I was
Four people is hard. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say that it's interesting that another loose thread that I'm going to be very interested to see moving forward is Matt's dad talks to Maggie on the phone, Matt's mom, right before he gets killed. Yeah. And we see Matt Murdock in an orphanage, and it's run by nuns, but we don't get to see his mom at all.
No, but we know she's there.
There is that line.
There is a line about it. There's at the very least, we know that the nun who talks to Stick knows that she's a nun. That doesn't mean she's in the building, but we know. But yeah.
But Maggie's a fascinating character, and I was just very happy to see them setting all that stuff up.
And thanks for bringing that up, because that was a cool line on second viewing when she says, "But that's another story." You're like, awesome! That's great. And they do the exact same thing with Elektra, right? Later on, when it's
so
like
comic book accurate, because he meets her in college.
That German girl, or the German, sorry, that Greek girl. Yeah, he's like that Greek girl that you dated, and then and they really kind of played it the same way, where it's like, we'll get to that. We'll get there.
I gotta say, if we do get other seasons of this show, I can't wait this team to portray Elektra.
Oh God! Yeah.
You know what I can't wait for, Manos? I can't wait for this team to do Bullseye.
Oh yeah, I know.
I thought the guy that Matt Murdock beat up and then he impaled his face on the spike was going to be Bullseye initially.
God, every time you say that, I cringe, man. You know that was a thing where I do have to admit that I had a moment of. I get that the whole point is that he thinks Matt's a coward and that he has got to take himself out. I don't know that anybody is capable of taking their face and just in a second going, you know what, screw it, I'm done.
Well, that's a psychopath to start with, though.
Yeah,
I love Daredevil's reaction to that. Even he was stunned.
That was more gruesome to me than the guy with the car door.
It was, because at least the car door was kind of covered up.
But then the... anyway. Well, maybe that's the thing we should talk about for a minute. I don't think the violence is gratuitous. I think it totally earns it, but it is cringeworthy, and it's supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing felt forced, as far as I could tell. Nothing... I mean, everything came out of the emotion of the characters and the story. Nothing felt like, we need a really dark, bloody moment here. No, I mean, nothing felt like that.
Yeah, it's really brutal and it makes you look away at certain points, but for the right reasons, because you're sort of experiencing the brutality of the city along with the people in the story. Like one of the ones that made me cringe the most was when they're having that fight in the bowling alley with the assassin that impales his face on a spike, and
there's a lot of that.
He hits the mafia guy's arm, and you see the bone split and come out of his arm.
Yes.
I was like, oh my god, that's brutal.
And I love when Foggy learns that Matt's Daredevil. He's cringing just with the rest of us about all the terrible stuff Matt's had to do and beating people up and the blood on his knuckles and how cut up he is. He's just as horrified by the violence as any one of us are.
Well, he just had the fight with the ninja and he got cut no fewer than 75
and dragged
times!
Through the floor with a knife in his gut.
Yeah, I love that line. I think he was a ninja.
I think he was a ninja.
Like, what? All the violence in this film, even though I don't know if I detected, maybe on a second viewing, I didn't really detect anything that's directly lifting any Miller stuff. But boy, it had a lot of that kind of Miller feel to it. When Miller does violence well, he's all about passion. And he mentions in that famous Daredevil interview, he's going after your guts, and that's when he does violence and fight scenes well. That's exactly how you feel. There's a different, even back then, and when he was on Daredevil for the first time, there's a difference about the violence in Daredevil versus the violence in X-Men or Spider-Man back in the early 80s. There was just something a little more tangible and
felt more
passionate
real and more gritty. And isn't it amazing
Yeah.
that they allowed them to do that, and then you get to the early 90s with McFarlane and Spider-Man and you had to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the visual look of the film is, I'm calling it a film because it feels like
Feels like a film.
It's a 18-hour movie.
Yeah.
It's so inspired. The direction and the lighting in this is so noir, Millery kind of tone. They sit in the one that I think of about the most is when they're sitting with the clients in the room, when they're talking to people before they're about to defend them, like with Karen and the assassin we were talking about earlier. And it's just Matt Murdock and Foggy sitting in a room in blackness behind them.
Yeah.
Like we're in some sort of noir
silhouette stuff. And there were a lot of fight scenes where I feel like I could see how the panel layouts would go.
Yeah.
Where it's not directly like frame for frame a thing. Like, you know, the movie was like, let's do the bullseye kills Electra, thank you. Electra scene frame for frame, regardless of the fact that it's kind of just thrown in there. But this, I had places where I was like, I could kind of see, like, it feels like it was storyboarded like a Enterprise. You know, it was, I'm sure, but it feels like a comic book. But then there are a lot of places too where it uses the medium to its advantage in a way that and does things that you couldn't do in a comic book also, right? Like, it feels like a comic book, but it also knows what it is. I mean, there are a lot of incredible fights, but my favorite is maybe still the one at the end of the second episode in the hallway. Something about the way that camera never goes into a room was just, it's really artistic, and I'm not sure that it means anything or whatever. I don't know that, you know, if I read into it I would find anything, but there was just something incredibly artistic and just impressive about the way that was shot. It's a oneer, and it just stays in that hallway, and these guys get thrown in and out of rooms, and I think that was kind of there mostly just to tell you, just to establish credibility and show you that this is going to be a kind of thing that you've not seen before.
I think that's...
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna let Manos talk now. Go ahead, Manos.
Yeah. I love that scene, and some people have compared it to some of the scenes in the Raid and Raid 2, which I've heard people talk about. That might be an influence. I think that scene, the way it's shot, and the way the actors or stuntmen work in that fight scene, really, you kind of like bring it down to a really street level of it. And I haven't seen a scene like this, and I don't know if I've seen it any in the Marvel movies, where, you know, it's one shot. It feels very intimate. The fact that you can't see into the other rooms, and the henchmen behave a lot like real people in that scene.
They fall down and they get up sometimes.
They get up and they're tired, like that second wave of the fight,
where
they're all just getting up, like, oh, okay, all right. and even Daredevil's like
they're
that.
not in wheelchairs, man.
But that's how it. Well, I mean, that's how they were acting, like, and that's how you and I would act if we were in, like, you know, horribly brutal fight. I mean, these guys don't want to keep fighting.
Yeah,
I'd
stay down. I'd be like Yurik in that one scene. I'm going to keep my head down. That's exactly what I would be doing. Steve, you haven't said a lot in a while, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's also a reference to the Old Boy film, both the 2003 and 2013 film, where they did pretty much the exact same thing. And what's really cool about that is when you get Matt walking to the hallway, he's about to knock on the door and break it down, there's very much like a penetrating devil camera kind of thing going on, where Matt's really like the devil about to take his due on all of these guys, and he saves that child the same way he kind of wishes he could save his dad, because that whole episode it had parallels with Matt's background and about how his father died. He's constantly waiting for him to come back, and that episode opens with the fact that this kid's dad was beaten and taken away from him. So Matt's kicking the door down. He's the devil Murdoch in that scene, and the first thing he says to the kid is, "Don't be afraid. Someone's here to protect you."
Yeah, it's awesome. He's a guardian devil, like they say at the end of the movie.
Except they don't feel the need to spell that out. Speaking of characters coming right out and deciding if they're the hero or if they're the villain, something I wanted to make sure and bring up before I lose my shot at it. This is one of the big points I kind of wanted to make if I could. Is I was very impressed with. I guess I'm really stuck on this whole thing of Daredevil and the Kingpin have the potential to be the same character. Isn't it interesting, by the way, that neither of these guys might have decided as quickly as they did of who they were and go where they go if it weren't for the other one. You have that classic superhero supervillain thing of one defines the other, so they become opposites, and like they have to both meet each other and be on opposing sides before they can decide exactly who they are. I was really impressed with how the major opportunity for change, which takes some time for them to take and decide what they're going to do with, both come in really similar ways for each of them. With Matt, it's the priest who, and arguably there are multiple opportunities for change, but as far as the deciding who I'm going to be and if I am the devil or the angel, and each of them have to make that choice. Important that Kingpin puts on white at the end. Because it's ironic and that's what he wears. There's a place where the priest talks to Matt and basically tells him that he gives him kind of two possible sides to how he is looking at maybe killing the Kingpin, and suggests that it's either that he wants to kill the Kingpin and is afraid he's going to have to come up with some other way, or that it's the opposite of that, and he has to decide, do I actually want to kill this man, or am I afraid that I have to? Which one is it? And Kingpin has the same scene with the Yakuza woman, with the woman who's also probably working for the Hand, who tells him that that you can't be good and bad, you have to pick one. Yeah. They both have that moment.
That woman, she's Chinese, and the stamp that they were putting on the heroin they were selling was the Iron Fist symbol, and he's connected to Chinese mythical stuff, so I would assume she's going to be somehow involved in the Iron Fist show.
And importantly, they also called it, the drug itself is called Steel Serpent, and that's Iron Fist's, I believe, arch nemesis.
I don't know anything at all about Iron Fist and did not notice that stuff. Cool. Good to know.
I love that moment where she hits Daredevil in the chest and throws him back a little bit. I mean, we've seen this woman, hobble with the cane throughout this whole show. It's like, there is a lot to this character we don't know. Well, and which would explain why everyone's so scared of her, which I always thought was interesting.
I wanted to briefly touch on some of the other villain characters, because I thought that the guy who played Owlsley, the Owl, was awesome. I liked his performance a lot.
He's a character. He plays a character in 24 that I liked a lot.
Yeah, he was great. I liked his kind of plan at the end where he tried to take half the Kingpin's money, and the Kingpin just didn't have any of it and killed him.
That was so funny. He spends all this time explaining this ultimatum, and finally Kingpin just looks at him and is like, so what about that? And just kind of takes him out. That is a thing, and I don't know if this is a criticism or not. I'm sorry, let me throw this out there real quick. Because the moment that Vanessa gets drugged and he starts making a big deal at the hospital that he needs to get checked out, I knew it was him.
Oh, I knew it was him, too. I mean...
And what I can't decide is if Kingpin knew it the whole time or not. Because if he didn't, there's something that, he should have really suspected. But he is weirdly, very patient with Owlsley. Owlsley is constantly saying things that you would think would make him grab his throat and rip his head off through the whole show, and he just constantly stands there and takes it. So it is a big payoff when he finally just goes, oh yeah, what about that, and just takes him out.
Yeah, well, he knew, Owlsley knows, he has a lot of money and power within this group, so he's totally comfortable with, talking to him like that. We'll see if, he obviously probably died from
No, he's dead.
We'll see if his son actually picks up the mantle. Maybe his son will really be the Owl.
The Owl.
That's actually what the showrunners have said, that if they bring in the Owl again, there's probably going to be his son.
Oh wow! Okay, that's cool.
Well, maybe they'll bring in Phil Urich, and then they'll do some kind of a character parallel with those two characters.
Actually, they've said specifically they have no son, or they have no kids.
Oh, that's right, they did say that. Okay, so there is no Phil Urich, and that's okay with me, because Dan and I have both made the mistake of reading the Green Goblin series that he was in.
That's right. He won't. There's no good Green Goblin. That's right.
Yay! Oh my God. Anyway, I'm sorry.
That's not gonna happen.
Dan's been chomping at the bit to say something. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just gonna make a funny observation I made. I don't know if anyone will get to this, but there was this scene at the end of the first episode where Owlsley is manipulating all of the money in the various accounts. And the way they shoot him, he looks exactly like Mitch McConnell. If you go back and watch it, it's like, oh my god, it's Turtle Man.
Who is that, Dan? I don't know who that is.
He's the minority leader for the Republicans in the Senate.
Oh, that's funny. They did a lot
I was
of
also
cool...
thinking, God, I kept thinking about Bernie Madoff with him.
Yeah, a little bit.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was a bit of an influence on his character and performance.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Yeah.
They did a lot of cool wardrobe stuff with trying to make him look kind of owl-like and stuff. There was especially, I don't know where it was, but somewhere in the middle of the season, there was especially this one place with like this really big bunched up scarf. This is right up against him. I was like, wow, he looks like the owl. And there's a moment where he's being measured for a suit, and I was like, surely not, right?
I was thinking
and
that
then
too.
they did not go that far, and I think that was for the best.
Well, I mean, they've got Stiltman's legs in the background, so I don't know how far they're willing to take it.
Stiltman's legs? What are you talking about?
I didn't see Stiltman's. Was Stiltman's legs in Potter's...
Stillman,
in Potter's shop?
Gladiator shop in the very background. There are giant pairs of Stiltman's giant silver stilts.
Oh my god.
That's amazing.
Well, we can certainly build things to the point where I can buy that kind of crazy stuff because, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is pulling all kinds of stuff off the page, and of course there is a lot of that here. But for we've got to build to it. We had to spend like 5 episodes with the Potter guy building Daredevil's suit because that's how long it would take. I love comparing something like this to, and this is not me saying that because we have this, it means that everything else I've ever seen I don't like anymore, but when you compare this to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and even Amazing Spider-Man, where with both those things I'm like, how in the world did he get the money and was able to build this suit that fast? And then you have this show that spends half of the season with somebody building the suit. That's fantastic.
I loved that the origin of the costume also introduces a future villain. That's the Gladiator, Potter. Yeah. And they have his motivation already set in. When the Kingpin gets out of jail, he's probably going to kill the loved one that he was blackmailing Potter with to build stuff for him in the first place. So he gets killed. He blames Daredevil for not fulfilling his promise and saying he'll protect his loved one from the Kingpin.
Yeah, his character and they already have like diagrams for his blades and everything. He even used the blade to throw at Daredevil when they first fight.
I got so excited.
And the man knows how to fight. That was I mean, Daredevil didn't win that real easy.
Yeah, I got really excited when he picked up those blades and threw it at him. It's like, oh,
and then in the shop in the background, there was a poster for the old movie Gladiator. Not
my god!
One, but the older one.
That's awesome. I didn't pick up on that.
Did you pick up on who Jack Murdock fought?
Yeah, Crusher Creel.
Crusher Creel.
Yeah.
Who we see.
I got that reference. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, speaking of weird, obscure references, I'm gonna ask you guys a question. First of all, because I feel like I almost am not qualified to have this discussion with you guys because you clearly know some of this better than I do. But here, I'm just look, I just work here. I have I have a question for you guys. Is Claire a comic book character?
Yeah,
she's the night nurse.
She's the night nurse.
Yes.
The night nurse. Yeah, I've heard of her before. Okay. Is Mike clearly a reference to anything?
Yes.
Mike Murdock.
Mike Murdock. There was a story in Daredevil a long time ago where he pretends that he has a twin brother named Mike to fool Karen and Foggy into thinking he's not Daredevil. It makes no sense.
Okay.
And it's hilarious.
Okay. Here's what's super cool.
Really stupid.
Here's what's super cool. It is possible. Now, I am reaching when I say this. Okay, I'm admitting that right now. It is possible that is a double reference. And here, because she doesn't just pull Mike out of a hat. She says, Mike was a guy that I dated who was also really good at keeping secrets. And the only thing I could think of that would fit in the timeline is Mike Peterson from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
That'd be interesting.
It's possible.
Really cool.
It's possible. Just throwing that out there. She could have dated Deathlock before he had a kid and all that. Just throwing it out there. It's possible.
The Mike Murdock thing always cracked me up because one of my favorite old Gene Colan covers is it's a great cover, but it's spoiled by Mike Murdock. It's a cover with like Matt Murdock walking down the street and there's a big Daredevil silhouette in the background, like holding like up buildings and stuff. It's a brilliant cover, but the cover says "The Death of Mike Murdoch."
That's awesome.
It was such a dumb idea. I mean, he just shows up and pretends he can see in front of like the people he talks to every day, and acts like his twin brother that he never sees.
Oh my goodness!
And what's funny is if you read the current Mark Waid comics, the Mike Murdoch hat has been in several scenes. Let's see, his new partner Kristen McDuffie. She's wore the hat a couple of times in recent issues.
That's great.
That's awesome.
I'm behind on that book by about 6 issues. I've got to catch up. That's pretty hysterical. Okay, guys, we've been at this for about an hour. Let's make sure we throw out some closing remarks and make sure to get to anything we haven't talked about that we want to make sure that we talk about, because I feel like we could do this for 3 hours. So let's start with Steve, because I feel like Steve has been somewhat shafted this talk. Steve, bring up something kind of major or minor or anything you want to talk about that you wanted to make sure that we got out. Go ahead.
I really want to spend a few minutes talking about the intro, because the intro for this show is incredible.
Yep. And that song will be stuck in my head for months.
Put out the need for an intro. Everyone would come to them saying that let's do a cinematic where it's the radar sense and you see the whole city. And they kept getting that idea and they hated it. And then this company called Elastic, who did the title sequence for True Detective, which is another incredible show, said that let's make it blood falling all over the place and revealing things that are invisible. And that's where the initial idea came from, and it's really cool. And if you map out everything you see, like the blind woman with the sword for justice, and then the water tower parts of the city, and the bridge, the pathway to the church before you see Daredevil, it's this really beautiful, simple way of explaining that justice is blind but still has power, and to get to justice in a place as small and insignificant as Hell's Kitchen that's blocked by giant towers, you have to cross a bridge of faith and ideals, and sometimes that leads you to people like Daredevil, and that's just great.
And now I will never have to write a superhero rewind about this show.
Just write everything then.
I'm just gonna write whatever Steve says and then put that in there and pretend it's my idea, and I'll give you something.
If I want to pick up on just a little bit of what Steve said, also if I want to add I love that theme song.
Yeah.
Which is nice and subtle, and it's not too bombastic, and it's also catchy at the same time and haunting, and not overdone. I just loved it.
Yeah, and how about the electric guitar heartbeat thing at the end?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yes.
I love how at the end of the intro they just show the comic book Daredevil with the logo. Yes. It was like, this is great.
This is and what's cool is it earns that, right? I mean, wouldn't it suck if we hated the show and it tried to give us that? Like, that really adds insult to injury with a thing that's not great, where it's claiming it's this thing that it isn't real. This is Daredevil, and I feel like this is one of those things where people can watch this show and love it and fall in love with this character, and they are Daredevil fans. They know that character. They don't have to ever read a comic book to appreciate that character.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I'm a huge Daredevil fan in the comics, and this show made me like a Daredevil costume that's black and red and has armor on it. I never thought that would happen.
Yeah.
Because in the comics, that costume's awful.
And I mean, I would love to eventually see something that's a lot more straight off the page, but it just makes too much sense within the narrative. You get so sucked in.
I love the costume. It's great.
You get so sucked in that you don't think about those kind of superficial things that you can't help but think about with things that are just plotted very superficially, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, of course.
Steve, did you want to talk about anything else besides the intro?
Do we want to spend some time on the painting?
Well, I know you want to spend. I tell you what, you talk about the painting for a minute, and then I'll do my Braille thing.
Okay, cool. Okay, the painting.
Steve and I have never talked about this show before. Yes,
the painting is, I think, this is the single most fascinating thing for me about this show. And when I did my review on my own channel, that's the big thing I wanted to talk about is the painting. It's this very classic. I don't think Rauschenberg actually did that painting, but Rauschenberg does all of these whiteout paintings. And in modern art, people wonder that what's the point of those paintings? And at the end of the day, when you talk to people like Rauschenberg, they'd say that the painting is about this artistic theory of openness, and that so you get the painting and it's not complete without someone viewing it. It's not complete without someone interpreting it. And so the people watching and the people putting into it are just as important as the painting itself, and that's where the art comes from. The art is the feeling you get in front of it, and that's Vanessa's whole point to Matt, and Matt's whole thing of not being able to see but still see in other ways. And so when you get that episode Rabbit in a Snowstorm named after the painting, and it's all about the law being an interpretive thing, and without the interpretation and the facts and the way the system works, the painting and the law itself wouldn't mean anything, and that it's a societal thing. It's about justice in relation to other people and those coordinations. And so you get that symbol, and then you go on to Kingpin, and the beauty of it is that Kingpin's point is just as valid, because when he looks at the painting, he's doing the same thing Matt is, which is just injecting the feelings he has into it. And so it becomes this symbol of purity, of escaping what his father is and deciding what kind of man he wants to be, but it's pushed and it's guided way too much by order and too much by knowing what you want to look for before you get there, which is the thing Vanessa tells Matt not to do, of don't know what kind of art you're looking for before you get there. And it's about the experience, and Kingpin's is kind of blinded by that, and I love that. He's blind to himself the way Matt is blind in reality, and that's all showed by the painting. I love that.
Did you notice at the end too? I like the way you analyzed that. I was thinking similar things about it. Did you notice at the end that Kingpin, the last shot we see of him is him staring at a white-walled prison cell? Yeah. That was such a cool way to bookend that whole thing.
And again, of course, he was forced and jailed into it, so it's still other people's hand guiding what he sees there, and I love that. It's great.
Something else that I picked up on there, and I don't know if this is just me, but this is some of my interpretation about that about the painting, and relating it to how Matt looks at things. I think that there is potentially a parallel to be drawn between Matt as a boy learning Braille and Fisk being so defined by that by the wall, because there's this line that's almost blink and you miss it, unless you're a blind person, and then you don't have to worry about blinking and missing anything. There's this line where Matt says when he's reading Braille that it's as much about what isn't there as what is. And I think the wall and the painting are very similar there, because obviously, as Steve was saying, it's what he brings to it. So like, you or I would look at Braille and we just see dots. You look at that painting and you just see weird lines, and it's a lot of empty space. And what's interesting about it is that, and what I think it's kind of representing, is that for both of them, what they are ultimately defined by is as much about what they aren't as what they are. So when you get to the end of the show, Kingpin is not all the things that Matt realizes that he is, and Matt is not all the things that the Kingpin ultimately decides or realizes that he is. It's as much about what isn't there as what is there, and I think that's absolutely fascinating, especially because that's their interpretation, that's their maybe decision. What they have decided is in themselves or not in themselves, or once again, is it a nature thing? I don't know. And so people bring what they bring to that painting, and I don't know. So maybe there's something there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Marvel is crazy if they don't use Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin in a Spider-Man thing in the future.
Oh my god, yeah.
Now that they've got both these things together, Kingpin was started out as a Spider-Man villain. Matt Murdock and Peter Parker are very good friends in the comics. I want to see that happen. That'd be amazing.
That'd be wonderful, just to see them all together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish these people would just do a Spider-Man Netflix show, but Spider-Man makes so much money at the box office, so we're not going to ever see that. But oh well.
Yeah, but I think that this kind of storytelling would be right for it, right? I mean, like, give us a good, solid high school drama with Spider-Man stuff in the background and maybe sometimes in the foreground, and plotted as intelligently as this, but obviously lighter. I mean,
right.
what Spider-Man is.
Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson, remember, said they interned in Manhattan, which is where Peter Parker does his superheroing. So maybe they know each other now that they have the...
Maybe Peter Parker also likes to go to that place and ride the elevator. Manos, was there anything you wanted to bring up before we eventually tie things up?
Oh boy, I don't know if there's anything left to really discuss thoughtfully. I will say one of the things that people give grief towards of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is their villains, and that outside of Loki, nobody really gets any in-depth look. There's the villains from Thor 2. What's his name?
Malekith.
Malekith, yeah. There's Malekith and Noman. And yeah, I think Kingpin gives us a villain that I think is even more fleshed out than Loki has been. I think it's a stunning performance. I think D'Onofrio was just amazing with it, and we've already discussed why. But just as a character, I'm not sure if I've seen things done with this character that I've seen done with a villain in a superhero film or series before. And I think it's just as much an achievement as anything else in the series.
I had the same reaction to him as I did. Now remember, this was like 12 years ago when I was, maybe less of a, thinking person. But I had the same response to him as I did to Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor in Smallville first couple seasons. And this is that performance if that was a more sophisticated Netflix show. I mean, that's what it is. We are defining these characters by each other, except that they don't have opposite worldviews. And that's what's so scary about the whole thing, is that Daredevil could totally turn into him.
And in Bendis' run in the comics, he literally does turn into him.
Man, I'm looking forward to... I've been thinking, what could they do for seasons? Like, the Elektra story could be a season. Born Again could easily be a season.
Oh,
yeah.
The Bendis Daredevil getting outed could be definitely a season of this show. I'd love to see them approach that material.
Well, and I think it would be so cool to see him get outed and compare how people react to that versus Iron Man, right?
Yeah.
And
of course that's what happened to Kingpin in the first season. He gets outed.
Yeah, good call. By the way, I love that he outs himself. In the way that's handled. No, that's a really good call. Yeah, might we continue comparing these characters even beyond this? As they've decided who they are, but they're still not that far away. They both come from really super humble beginnings. You could have seen those two going to school together, right? You could have seen him, Kingpin Wilson Fisk bullying Matt Murdock. You could have seen Matt being the kid that his dad tells him to keep kicking.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see if they do the whole outing thing, because obviously being outed to the Kingpin is the inciting incident in Born Again, and Bendis' run being outed to the entire public is the inciting incident in that run. They could combine those two things, just have Kingpin out his entire identity and destroy his life even further with that. Because the whole reason Kingpin outs him in the comics is because he foiled all his plans in Miller's original run. So I could definitely see them continuing those story threads and doing something with that.
And considering how great this relationship is between those people, and how Kingpin almost has a tantrum when he realizes Daredevil just destroyed his whole adventure, the kind of over-the-top life destruction that he does in Born Again makes even more sense here.
That's the thing we have not talked about yet, and we probably should really quick, that these two men are still kind of children.
Yeah.
And I mean, Fisk especially, but there's a grain of truth at least. We haven't talked at all about Stick. There's a grain of truth at least to what Stick says when he says, or is it Stick or somebody says that he's a child playing hero? No, it's Fisk. Fisk says that. On the phone call. And that's fascinating because Fisk constantly throws temper tantrums when he doesn't get his way.
Yeah. And I think I can't remember. I was watching superhero enthusiasts talk about this. I think he did compare him to like a child because like he's like a giant round baby that's bald headed and
that's true.
He's like a giant. I think it was super.
Kingpin is the Gerber baby if he was evil.
He called him like a baby man or something.
Oh my god!
Like he reacts
hilarious.
the same way, which I thought was pretty funny. But if we could just quickly talk about Stick, I love the how the Stick stuff seemed to be a little bit of an interlude to the main plot, although it did tie into it and did lead to other things. But it was almost a nice break, actually. You know, where not everything is directly too tied to the storyline, and we got to see some, backstory from Murdoch as well. And I just love Scott Glenn as that character.
Yeah, he's so good.
Yeah, he's perfect.
I think this plot stuff that they're potentially setting up with Stick got me thinking, and I think I have some sort of idea where they might be going with the Defenders miniseries coming up. So Stick in the comics has ties to the Hand, and I'm assuming the war that he's talking about that's coming is with them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we see the guy that presumably works for the Hand. It's he's a hand ninja, and he's talking about buying out a block in New York. I would be very surprised if the Defenders miniseries isn't Shadowland but done better.
See, that's what I was gonna say. That's what it should be.
Yeah, because
I would love to see a good Shadowland.
Yeah,
Because Shadowland is a great idea. It's like Civil War, right? It's like, no, do that. Just write it better.
Yeah, I agree. And, the Punisher is intimately involved in that story, and I want to see this Daredevil interact with the Punisher like he does in most runs, so it would be great to see him introduced there. That in the comic, the Shadowland comic, one of the things that they do is they build that giant Shadowland temple thing in the middle of the city for the Hand to operate out of. And I think that's probably what they're looking to build, which is awesome.
Well, isn't Punisher basically Matt Murdock if he went as far as he was afraid of going, but has the belief that he's not as bad as the Kingpin?
Right.
Yes.
I generally think of the Punisher as a psychopath, actually.
That's okay. I just defined psychopath.
I generally think Punisher is the guy that Matt Murdock pretends he is when he threatens to throw people off rooftops and say, I enjoy it. No, this guy enjoys it. He's an actual serial killer that just coincidentally kills criminals.
Yeah, and doesn't draw a difference between punishment and justice like Matt Murdock does. Yeah. And I mean, like, it's important that even if Matt Murdock were to kill a person and thought it was necessary, he would still look at that differently than the Punisher does.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And as Dan's mentioned on other videos, I mean, it's not like Daredevil has never killed anyone in the comics, right?
Yeah, he's killed a select few people.
Yeah, he has. He kills a helicopter pilot in Born Again, from what I remember.
I believe so, yeah.
And they did a retcon. He accidentally thought he killed a prostitute in Man Without Fear, but that was actually retconned years later.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Where he didn't kill her.
He goes crazy and then decides that thinks that his twin brother is real, and then he kills him.
Since this is spoiler broadcast for the TV show, I won't spoil, how they retconned it. I don't normally like retcons, but I was satisfied with that.
When you said for the TV show, I was like, we have a TV show? That's awesome.
Yeah. No, the Daredevil TV show.
Oh. But
I'm happy with that retcon because I wasn't totally cool with Murdoch accidentally killing a bystander.
Well, real quick, now that you're mentioning accidentally killing people, I want to ask you guys a philosophical question. So I guess I'm just talking to Steve because no, I'm kidding. I want to ask you guys real quick. No, I'm kidding, man. Come on back, man. Okay, there he is. I want to ask you guys a quick question, and that is, where would Matt Murdock have gone had he thrown the guy off the roof into the dumpster and he actually died? What happens then? Because that's the question I always ask myself with superheroes when they're like, I don't kill. But you brutalize people to a point where it'd be really, like, the only reason they don't die is because the script says they don't die, right? Like that happens a lot. So when he throws the guy in the dumpster and he has that moment where he's like, boy, I hope he's alive because otherwise this is going to be awkward. And he goes, yeah, he'll live. I love that he's in a coma for a long time, because he got that close. But Dan, Steve, even Manos.
I submit that Daredevil might have known that he would survive because Daredevil fell in that dumpster himself earlier in the episode. That's where she found him.
Well, that's true, but remember how brutally he was hurt and stuff. I mean, like, it's hard to know what happens when you beat a guy up that badly and then you throw him off a roof, and he can land all kinds of different ways, right? Like, it doesn't matter how precise you toss him. I mean, like,
I was thinking,
how could you be sure he wouldn't die? I don't know.
It's funny you asked that, because there's I think it's when he puts the chokehold on Potter. I remember thinking, like, hey, God, remember that cop that put that chokehold on that one dude that was on TV? That back in New York City, that caused a lot of problems because he accidentally killed the guy. The guy couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the guy wasn't completely in the best health, so putting him in a chokehold killed him.
Now, he didn't have Matt Murdock's training, right? Like, Matt would know how much pressure to put and stuff like that. But I don't know, Dan.
But that's the risk. I mean,
and Matt Murdock can hear people's heartbeats too.
Yeah,
that's true.
And so he knows what kind of health they're in when he does stuff like that.
Yeah,
I mean, there's always the risk.
Good point.
But
what would have happened?
Accidentally killed someone?
Yeah, what if he accidentally killed someone?
If he accidentally killed someone, maybe he would have killed the Kingpin.
Would he? I mean, that's the question.
That in what episode was it? I think it's Path of the Righteous, or right before that. Where
God,
he
Steve,
says,
you're like memorizing episodes. That you're so overzealous, dude. You're like, you know everything. You're sitting there with 10 pages of notes. You probably got like pie graphs.
No, it's not Path of the Righteous. Path of the Righteous is where the theme comes out, but it's Speak of the Devil, where in Speak of the Devil, he talks to the priest, and the priest says that one of the interpretations of that Path of the Righteous quote is that the moment a good person turns bad, it's as if everyone's turned bad because they pollute the water that they're in. And so when he talks to Foggy after he finds out he's Daredevil, he says that when he fought the Hand Ninja, that he went there to kill Kingpin. That was his goal the whole time.
Good point.
And Foggy says it doesn't matter that you didn't kill him, it's attempted homicide still. And he poisons the well, and what brings him out of that dark corner is that it affects his relationship with Foggy, it affects his relationship with Carrot, and Stick's whole message to him is that he needs to get rid of his attachments, and he doesn't. So I would say that even if he killed someone like the Kingpin intentionally, it wouldn't last, or he wouldn't become necessarily a bad person because he's still got other people around him.
Yeah.
And every time Daredevil goes off the deep end in the comics, it's usually because he's alone.
But what's fascinating is that Kingpin also has attachments, and he goes that far.
Yeah, that's true.
And he starts from that place.
Attachments aren't really the best people, really.
No, that's true. That's the thing, is that he's got a cause and they buy into it. Yeah.
They are supporting him.
Vanessa's okay with him blowing up the city, so I mean at that point I guess his attachments won't mean as much.
Yeah, that moment when he's like, you've got to tear it down, and then she looks at him and like it becomes very clear right then she knows exactly what he's talking about, and then they're standing there watching buildings explode, and you're like, she's in it for the long haul now. When she first popped up, I was like, "Oh, cool!" I felt like such a dumb fanboy for a minute, because somehow or rather it didn't occur to me that that's who that was when he first talked to her, and when she's like, "I'm Vanessa," that was such a big reveal for me. I was like, "Oh, cool! He's not even married yet. Okay."
I got plenty excited when I first saw her. I was like, "Oh, is this Vanessa?" That's great, because I didn't even have any instinct that they were going to like carry it to be a major story part element to this. I do jokingly think that moment where they're looking out the window watching those buildings explode, I half expected
the ending of Fight Club.
Yeah, the end of the Fight Club. Vanessa, you have entered my life at a strange time.
That was a pretty impression of both Fisk and that guy. Well done.
Thank you.
And then it becomes see, all I can think about right now, Manos, is that contestant who reviews their viewers right now that's so into Fight Club. Okay, Dan, any major things you want to talk about that we haven't done yet?
Let's see. I just want to say that I'm really pleased with this because this has to be a dream come true for Frank Miller, because they based this principally on The Man Without Fear, which was originally the script for the Daredevil movie that Fox rejected. And they rejected it because he had the red costume in one scene at the end of the movie, and he just wears his costume from a 70s television show throughout the entire movie.
And now we got that, and guess what? Everyone accepted it because it makes sense.
Yeah,
and it's not about what that costume looks like. And also, Claire very quickly is like, "That's a crappy costume."
Right. And Marvel was kind enough to just make Miller's script pretty much into a 13-hour movie instead of a 2.5-hour movie. So I really hope he's watched this and enjoys it, because I don't think we're going to get anything better than this besides hopefully season 2. Charlie Cox is the definitive version of this character. He's amazing. He's like Christopher Reeve as Superman, iconic for Daredevil. I think. I think this is the gold standard that everyone's going to compare the adaptations of this character to. I think
there will never be any other. What is the point?
I will not have Rex Harrison maligned.
You purist.
Rex Harrison. Okay.
But other than that, I don't really have anything else to say. I think we covered it pretty thoroughly.
Okay, well, before we go, let me throw this out there real quick. I think this would be a good place to close, and that is predict the future. What does this do now for superheroes on screen, for comic book adaptation? Is it going to change the world like I think it is?
I hope so.
I think it depends on what kind of acclaim the series gets, because people love it right now, but let's say a few months in the future we get to the Emmys and it sweeps every category like it should, then it's going to do a great deal for for people getting credibility to superhero shows, getting stuff like Arrow, maybe not kicked off, but challenged to be better, because now there's a mainstream superhero show that won a major award. Let's say that the Emmys are as biased as everything else, because they are, and Daredevil gets nothing, then I feel like its impact is only within our community and not necessarily to stuff like Arrow.
But might that still change stuff, right? I mean, like, might if this sells really well, regardless of what happens critically with it, might people? I mean, now you might get knockoff stuff that just doesn't know how to tell stories this well, of course. But I guess my question is,
it's going to happen.
Might this at the very least? Yeah, it always happens, Manos. It'll happen with Guardians. Just you wait. But might we? Dare I say? Have some things that after this say, oh, really? So you can just straight up adapt comic books, or at least keep them what they are, these characters, to a longer form thing, and like what I'm hoping this does is, outside of Marvel, even give us more screen stuff that is done the same way as we tell comic book stories, i.e. in a serialized format. Might we bring more long-form storytelling to screen? That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I think Marvel, this is just the next evolution of what they've been trying to do with their movies in the first place, right? Because they've been trying to make the movies sort of serialized, and you can only get them every so often because it takes an extraordinary amount of time and money to make one of those movies. But they found a way to just make comic books into a live-action thing with this show, and I think if this is as successful as I'm hoping it is, I think we're just going to get more adaptations of these characters on streaming shows, and they'll write them like 13-hour movies like this does. I mean, I hope Marvel greenlights more shows with these characters, and maybe not necessarily with the same tone, because at this point we've got the Defenders, and they've all... those are characters that all make sense to have a similar tone. They're all in the same sort of gritty, street-level, realistic kind of thing. I'd love it if they greenlit a show about one of their lighter characters. What if we gave The Warriors 3 a Netflix show? That would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless, yeah.
I want to pick up on what Dan was just saying there, because one of the things that I love so much about the Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise is that they have been able to deliver what we enjoy about comic books in film and TV, and in a lot of cases so far, like for the first time for film viewers, because there are people who watch comic book films and TV shows and only know that. There is that audience.
There's a lot of that audience.
Yeah, there's a lot in that audience, and they've always been that way. And they're kind of introducing different tones, like in the regular Marvel universe. There's all sorts of different tones, different types of books here and there. DC Comics too.
We've already been doing that in the movies.
Yeah, we're doing that in the movies now. And, up until recently, up until really the Iron Man film, before this cinematic universe, comic book films, outside of, just them, being like just Spider-Man movies or Batman movies, a lot of them did kind of feel the same. And tone would kind of reflect on success. Like, hey, the Batman movie did well. Let's all make them feel like the Batman movie. Hey, the Spider-Man movie did well. Let's make them feel like the Spider-Man movie, blah, blah, blah. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, what I think is really wonderful is the tones are all over the place. I mean, think about this. This Daredevil series takes place in the same universe as Guardians of the Galaxy. Think about that. It's not impossible for him to run into Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And
to articulate your point, I saw this great quote that said, the moment Kingpin is beating someone's head off and closing it with a car door, somewhere in this universe, a baby talking tree is dancing to the Jackson 5.
Exactly. Agent Carter, the Iron Man movies, the fun Captain America stuff with the laser beams that incinerate people. All that stuff is in this same, continuity.
Yeah.
And that's actually wonderful. As a comic book fan, of comic books and their adaptations, this is wonderful. I've never seen it get this sophisticated.
Well, Manos, some people are gonna lynch me for asking this question, but it's a thing I've been thinking ever since this came out, and I can't help but ask it. Now, this isn't on the big screen, so it might not affect anything, but I can't help but wonder what do Warner's execs say when they see the show, because what Warner seems to kind of think they have, and we'll see where they go after Batman and Superman, and if some of their movies get lighter, it's possible, I just don't know, but it seems like they think they have maybe thought, especially with Man of Steel, that okay, Avengers, the Marvel universe is doing all these like really kind of light, what people look at as popcorn fluff pieces. We'll do the super serious stuff, but like all Marvel did here was finally adapt something that is that, right? Like it's not, oh, let's make superheroes dark. It's, well, we've got one that's like that, and it just made more sense to put it here than it did in movies. What does Warner's do when they see this? Might it make for better competition? That's what I'm hoping.
I hope.
They don't have to worry about being dark. Just make the stories you want to. You just make characters what they are.
Exactly.
Bring them to screen.
I feel like when I keep watching what Warner Brothers is doing, I really do feel that sincerely the problem is they're acting as if it's still the 90s or the early 2000s, where they're
just like DC Comics is. Okay.
Yeah, they're chasing. They're chasing trends instead of what Marvel has been doing, and it's been kind of creating trends, and they're creating trends just by doing what they do ordinarily in the comics. In film, hey, this is all new stuff. So.
And again, I know people are going to hate me for saying that. I'm not trying to bash them. I'm asking a legitimate question.
No. That is a.
I'm just curious
very legitimate
to
question.
See if they respond in any way to Marvel being successful at grittier stuff.
Because what I hope is every time something breaks through, I keep hoping this will inspire filmmakers and producers and artists, to create their own stuff in that spirit without ripping it off. And then, exactly. There are people who try to just kind of
you hope
rip
that
it
a thing
off.
like this inspires people to innovate, not to just do that and say, oh, Daredevil is popular, we got to make something that looks like Daredevil. No, what Daredevil tells you is that you can take these kinds of risks and do stuff that is, out of the box.
Yeah.
Just throw billy clubs at the wall and see if they bounce.
All right, any closing statements, guys?
I don't think so. I'm just giddy that this show's this good. The Spider-Man movies are in a better place than they were. Well, at least I was thinking about it a little while ago. But this made up for any qualms I would have with any Spider-Man movie ever. This is my second favorite character in comics, and this is the best superhero adaptation I've ever seen. It makes me very happy.
Makes me like him more, and I've always liked Daredevil.
I'm actually proud of Daredevil. There's something about the character he's always avoided crap for the most part.
Yeah.
Well, and yay to see him make
is.
the mainstream like this, right? I mean, like you said earlier, a lot of people know who he is, but this is going to turn a bunch of people into Daredevil fans. And now suddenly Marvel's got that dark character that can rival Batman a little bit, you know what I mean? I don't think Daredevil actually will ever be Batman popular. I don't think I'll ever have anybody will ever make a basement like my Batcave that's a Daredevil cave. But, well,
I mean, I have
Daredevil stuff in my room, but it's not a Daredevil cave.
But it's not a Daredevil cave.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, this is as good or better than any Batman movie we've ever had. Now, again, it gets to cheat a little bit because it gets to be longer. Imagine if Nolan had been given 13 episodes of Batman, right? Okay. Who knows what Begins or Dark Knight would have been like that? But who knows what those stories would have been. But I'm just saying that they get to play in that sandbox now, and they've earned it, I think.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what this showrunner gets to do next. Steve was telling me that he said he wants to do a Punisher show really badly.
Yes.
I hope Marvel lets him do it.
That will be so hard to watch. I will turn my head every 5 seconds.
I mean, not only him, he wants to do a Punisher show, the writers of Captain America want to do a Punisher show, the Roosters want to do a Punisher show, everyone at Marvel wants to do a Punisher show at this point.
Watch it get greenlit in a month.
And Steve was telling me that Marvel has the rights to Ghost Rider back now, and he's involved in Shadowland. I hope he gets a show too, because he belongs in this talk of the Marvel universe
that
too.
We can't stop talking about freaking Shadowland. I almost brought it up earlier, and I thought you guys would make fun of me. I was going to be like, yeah, they should do Shadowland right, and then everybody keeps going back to Shadowland.
Well, I
It's
mean,
a good idea done badly, so it just makes sense.
Yeah. They're probably going to do Civil War well, and that book is not very good, in my opinion.
That's what I think, too.
So.
Yeah. I'm also in the same camp of, it's a cool idea, but it was just poorly done.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's an idea. I got this great idea. Tell me what you guys think of this. I might be a crazy person when I say this, but here's how you do Shadowland right. You have Matt Murdock take over the Hand, right?
Yeah.
But there's no mind control. Just throwing that out there. Zero.
Inside of him or anything.
No mind control.
No demons? What the hell?
No.
I guess they're gonna have my excuse to have Ghost Rider in Shadow.
No demons, Manos. Now, I know, Manos, that you're a purist and you need everything to be exactly like it was on the page, but I submit that there should be yeah, that was a joke. Manos is not like that. I submit that there should be no demons, even in bottles. No, maybe there should be a demon in a bottle, because we haven't done
there should be a
that.
demon in a bottle at least until Robert Downey Jr. leaves.
That should happen, yeah.
Karen Page has already unleashed demons in bottles in the show.
That's true. There has been some demons in bottles. Yeah, and eels in throats.
Mighty eel power.
Mighty eel power. Well, anyway,
Eels
guys,
and avocados at law. I love it.
Guys, this was absolutely delightful. And
Yeah,
I sure
agree.
appreciate having you guys. We went for almost 2 hours, and I feel like there's still probably lots of stuff we didn't get to. But I thought we covered the gambit pretty darn well.
I think so, too. I mean, yeah, you're right. I could have talked for a couple more hours about this if I really wanted to.
I could have talked 13 hours about this.
Could you, Manos? Commentaries, even?
Oh, man. I would like to issue out an apology to Rex Smith, who is the actual name of the Daredevil from Trial of the Incredible Hulk. I IMDb'd him a second ago and was like, oh, it's Rex Smith.
I need to watch that at some point. It would be really funny to watch that right after seeing this.
It's really, really bad.
Considering that show, it could have been great, but it wasn't.
Well, anyway.
John Rhys Davies is Kingpin, by the way, from the Indiana Jones film.
Oh, really? That's pretty funny.
Cool.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, folks, thanks so much for watching. We sure appreciate it. I hope you had a good time with this. And leave your comments and let us know what you thought of the Daredevil Netflix show. And thanks, guys. I sure appreciate you. I'm Captain Logan. This was Dan Torrey.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Mr. Steve Baxi.
Thanks, everybody. Go watch Daredevil now.
Again. Do it again.
Yes.
And the incredible Real Manos.
Goodbye, folks.
See you, folks.